Vladimir Putin and the president of Eritrea had a conversation at the Russia Africa Summit in St. Petersburg recently, and I would like to play for you a brief clip of Eritrea's president's support and his statement is more so of a speech that he gave before Vladimir Putin. He spoke about Russia and the ongoing conflict with Ukraine. I want you to take a look at this because this is an outside perspective that you won't see in the U.S. or Western mainstream media, from Western politicians, from uh, our leaders here in America. It's a very different perspective, but what he represents is the majority of the rest of the world. Here in America and in the West, generally, we get so involved and insulated in our little bubble here, where we're confronted with so much rank propaganda that only shows us one side of every story. And the powers that be would have us to believe that there's only one way to think about a certain topic or issue or situation, when in fact there are many, and this is simply one of them.
Articulate that issue and say our views, at least how we see the situation from our perspective. When people talk about Russia, Ukraine, I say there is no Russia-Ukraine war at all. There is no Russia-Ukraine conflict. This is war declared by NATO on Russia. The war declared by NATO on Russia is not only for Russia, it's for dominating the whole world. It's for hegemony. This is an agenda developed after the end of the Cold War. They came up with this fantasy about containing Russia, containing any power, small, big, that challenge them technologically, economically, socially, culturally. They have to contain everybody. This defunct ideology, it's a defunct ideology. I say Russia did not do its preparation to face this declared war. Even though Russia was aware about the dynamics of what was going on. NATO is defunct. NATO does not exist. NATO is under intensive care. EU does not exist. EU is under intensive care. Now, 30 years ago, when they decided to contain Russia, they felt that was the major threat for them. China was not considered a threat at the time. Now they know. They missed the point. They couldn't contain Russia. They will never contain Russia. Ukraine is a sacrifice. Ukraine is a price they have to pay. They will not pay it on their own. They will provide billions and billions, even trillions, to continue this war. And now we need to have the narrative straight. This is not war between Russia and Ukraine. This is declared war against Russia because Russia was the major threat at the time. Now they can't dominate the whole world. They have to defeat Russia so that they hegemonize everything. No one should be their equal technologically, militarily.
Now, that clip in its entirety is about 15 minutes long. I obviously I'm not gonna put the whole 15-minute clip there of him simply speaking. I highly recommend you seek it out and watch the rest of it. If you're interested, even if you're not interested, I'd recommend you go seek it because it's pretty invigorating. It is. But I did write down a couple of things that I would like to touch on briefly here in this video as we try to unravel all that he said. So firstly, he started off by saying very overtly and unabashedly that there is no Russia-Ukraine conflict. And once again, this is how the rest of the world sees this. This summit between Russia and Africa, Russia's relationship with China, the BRICS as a whole, they are a majority of the world, okay? That's what they represent. The United States and their allies, they're not the majority. They just aren't by sheer population, okay? They represent the BRICS and the rest of the world as opposed to the West do. They represent the majority opinion of the world. So he says there is no Russia-Ukraine conflict. He says that this is a war by NATO on Russia. I mean, where are you going to hear that here in America besides somebody like me telling you on a random YouTube video? You're definitely not going to hear that in mainstream media. I mean, this is insane to come out of somebody's mouth, according to the pundits and the politicians that are fueling this war by sending or by signing off to send more money and weapons over to Ukraine to fuel the bloodshed and keep this entire operation going. This is hearsay. This is nonsense to them, right? He says that, and the reason for this war on Russia by NATO is to dominate the world. It's for hegemony, and he calls this reason a fantasy. He says it's not going to happen, and I have news for you: it's not happening. Okay, we see what's happening over in Ukraine. We see that it's not going the way that the United States and that the West would have it to go. We see that a lot of their aims are being met with severe consequences for them. And they are actually, in effect, accelerating the process themselves of their dying empire and of a new, not just power as it be China, because we know that China is the rising power and that the US is the falling power, but new powers with an S, plural, in the BRICS that are rising as the US led coalition is in fact on the decline. He says that they want to contain powers that challenge them, and he calls this a defunct ideology. He says that the NATO/EU is under intensive care, and that indeed they are. This is all a part of the great decline of the American-led empire. And he says something that has been echoed over a prolonged period of time, pretty much ever since the Ukraine situation was birthed. He said that Ukraine is a sacrifice. And indeed they are. I've said this phrase many times, and I got it from particularly Mr. Chaz Freeman, but many other people, Noam Chomsky, and many others that have good commentary on this situation has said the same thing. They are fighting down to the last Ukrainian. That's what the United States is doing, in effect, by continuing to fuel this, by ruining peace deal talks, by going in the opposite direction that would bring this entire thing to peace. He says that the world must be prepared to stand with Russia as they confront the US-led coalition that would like to surround them and obviously surround China. You see the antics that's being carried on over in the Taiwan Strait. And just to wrap this up, he says that, and I thought this was very interesting because you'll never hear this, obviously, here in the United States. You have to search far and wide to hear something like this. But he says that the collapse of the Soviet Union was a tragedy. I mean, this is how the people outside of the walls of the United States see the world. I always think stuff like this is amazing because you don't hear people say these things on U.S. television, on mainstream media. Not that they necessarily have to, but just opinions like these are lost. Ideologies like these are lost. They don't exist, really. And American citizens love to talk about how people in China are propagandized, or they point to people in North Korea, how they have no control. I gotta tell you, man, when the groupthink is so large that you're only allowed to think only one thing or a set of things, especially as it pertains to different issues, you really need to start to look inward and maybe ask yourself, are you allowed to think? Are you allowed to think freely? Are you actually free in any true sense of the word in your own situation? And obviously, he spoke about that new world order, that phrase, those collection of words that we've been hearing so very frequently over these past several, years, months, weeks, leading up to the point that we are at in this present day and time. But that was the president of Eritrea, really, really speaking what I believe will end up being very prescient words, obviously in days, weeks, and months to come. I mean, everything that he said, he pretty much hit the nail on the head. And I have to say, it's very refreshing to get an opinion like this because obviously, over here in the West, the United States, we really don't get this that often.